Good day, Rush Nation. Welcome to the 5 Yard Rush Daily Fantasy Sport Show. Slightly different voice that you're hearing this week. You're probably used to hearing Mark doing the presenting, but Mark has fled the country and has gone to Italy. He did tell me where in Italy, but I've completely forgot where he actually said. And as far as I'm aware, he is doing absolutely fine over there. He's loving it. The weather is a little bit better than what it is here. You would think that he is fine dining on pizzas, pastas, and lovely wine and gelato and things like that. But actually, he sent us a picture earlier, Jack, didn't he, that he's enjoying a McDonald's over there. So typical Mark, stuffing his face with the Mackies, which, it's to be fair, it's new to Mark this year, and I'm sure he's probably had lots of pasta and pizza and stuff like that in his life. So go and enjoy your Mackies, Mark.
It was a Happy Meal.
Yeah, it was. And he didn't specifically say that it was for his children or anything. So I
No.
can only assume that Mark is on the fish finger Happy Meal as things stand over in Italy.
He just put the little toy in there.
Yeah, L fish fingers over there. You might notice, for anyone that is watching the show, or if you're listening this back, there is a familiar voice that you've heard there in the background. That is Mr. Jack Humphrey. Great friend of the show. He's been on a couple of times this season and in the off season. And anyone that is in the community on Twitter who follows Fantasy or DFS will, of course, know Jack. How are things with yourself, Jack?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm good. You've had me back again. This is,
Yeah.
I'm honoured, mate. To be honest, again, to be back. And
you are on a hot streak. So with Mark out of the country, there was no one better to get on this week than the man who is just stealing everyone's money at the moment.
Yeah, the last 3 weeks have been kind to me, I've got to admit. So the team that me and Barrett built 2 weeks ago just went absolutely nuts. But that only comes second in the slate, that team, because I sort of done a little edit to that team. But we had Chris Godwin in the team that we built. And then I thought, I'm going to use the same team, but I'm going to put Mike Evans in instead of Chris Godwin. And Mike Evans scored a touchdown in that game.
Yeah.
I ended up beating the team that we built by 0.6 or something like that points. And yeah, so I ended up coming first, second, and third 3 weeks ago, which was nice.
Just every time there is some kind of NFL contest, I open either my WhatsApp or my Twitter DMs or just Twitter notifications in general, and I'm seeing Jack at the top of leaderboards. One of my friends was actually doing really well on the red zone on Sunday, and Jack, you absolutely eclipsed him in them late games. If he wasn't going to win, I was happy that you did, mate, to be honest, because I was nowhere close to winning. So yeah, but you've been absolutely tearing it up. And one of the things I wanted to just ask you, Jack, because there'll be people that will be listening that I know we've like preaching to the choir almost with anyone who's into their NFL, but there's a lot of new faces in this community this year. People that have been playing FPL, there's a lot of people getting into the NFL, and I think because we've got FanTeam, that has been one of the reasons why people are naturally playing things like the EPL monsters on FanTeam, and NFL is one of the best sports to play on there and in DFS in general, I think, especially because we're spoiled a little bit with Redzone. One of the things that you have been discussing or mentioning a lot on Twitter recently is around process, and it was more so just for anyone that is new to this, or anyone that has been playing a while that is maybe struggling or doesn't really understand some of the thought process that goes into picking a lineup. When you refer to process in your tweets and in your mentions, what is it that you're meaning specifically? Not necessarily what your process is end to end, Jack, because I don't want to obviously give away your secrets because it's working. But when you talk about process, what are the kind of things that feed into that?
No, it's a good question. And there was something I was going to do in the off season, was try and write an article about process with DFS, etc. When I get a little bit more time, basically when the NFL season's over. But my process is I take a look at the games, the slate. So, for instance, let's use tonight's game because it's a showdown slate. It's easier to use a one-game sample, for example. So tonight we've got the 49ers versus the Tennessee Titans.
Mm-hmm.
I look at the game. I look at the matchup per position to start with. That's where I always start. So the QB, for instance, Jimmy Garoppolo, how many points are the Tennessee Titans giving up to opposing quarterbacks on the season? I look at things like that. I look at it in the last 2 weeks, the last 4 weeks. And so I break that down per position. I then look at the over-unders in the game, what Vegas is telling us, what the score's potentially going to be. So tonight, they're looking at around the 44-point mark. So it's not projected to be a very high-scoring game. I actually think it's going to go over that, personally, but
yeah, I do as well.
We can maybe get to that later. So yeah, they're my first 2 major processes. Then for tonight's game, for example, again, I look at the players that are involved. I create a player pool of my own. So I've already created a player pool tonight, and I've dwindled that down to 18 players from the slate. I then build projections. So I project how many points so-and-so is going to score. Like I've got Jimmy Garoppolo for about 280 passing yards tonight because you can pass on Tennessee. That's their weakness. So I've got Jimmy Garoppolo for about 280 passing yards tonight. I've got AJ Brown. He's my highest projection tonight. I think he's going to go nuts coming back off this injury as well. So I really like AJ Brown. So yeah, I do that. Build my own projections, put it all together, and then But it's also because you've got captains and vice captains on FanTeam, so you have to within that player pool. I try and pick out 3 players that I want to have as a captain. So I'll tell everyone my captains tonight. It's George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, and AJ Brown. So they're my captains. And for tonight's slate, I want to pair my captain. I want to make the vice captain the quarterback for that person. So Deebo Samuel is going to be Jimmy Garoppolo, AJ Brown, Ryan Tannehill. So that's another thing I do. I look at within my player pool. I create a player pool within that for captains and vice captains. But yeah, that's the main thing I've really learned in the last sort of 3 weeks. Like just trick. You can look. I used to look at the slate, and it's a bad process doing that. You look at it, you think, yeah, so and so's got a good matchup. Yeah, stick them in, and I'd build blindly. I don't think that's a good idea. I think you need to create a player pool, create scenarios in your head, and then you have to go. There's a lot of like luck and gut feeling about things as well. You have to go with your gut on certain players. Like that game that I had the win on last Sunday, which was the Packers and the Vikings game. I had to get the Packers and the Ravens game. I had to get talked into a little bit for Mark Andrews. I didn't. He wasn't projecting very highly in my model. It's something I went back and took another look at. And I was like, well, what do backup quarterbacks actually do when they get involved when they become the starter of the game? They look for the short passes underneath, and that's to the tight end or the slot receiver.
Yeah.
So I then boosted up Mark Andrews, and then I built my team for there. Obviously, my red zone teams have been a bit different. That's another process I've learned in the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks. I've become heavily involved in these heavy game stacks. So I find a game that I really like that's going to be a high-scoring game. I'll use the example that me and Barrett done, which was the Buffalo Bills and Tampa Bay game. Me and Barrett projected that to go 60 points or over. It did. It had to. I mean, if it didn't hit that, then that's. But I'm sure. I think we mentioned this in the summer, Nick, that you within DFS, you build a team that can come last.
Yeah.
But has that high ceiling, and it can always come first. So
yeah,
if that didn't hit 60 points that game, for example, that team could have busted and come last. But that is generally my process. Again, it's something in the summer I'm going to write about, and I might even do a couple of little pod series on it just so people understand it a bit more. Unfortunately, I just don't really get the time at the minute. I'm always happy to help people. So if you ever want to DM me or message me, I get people messaging me at the minute asking for help. I'm always happy to help. But just to also know that I have zero control over these players that are on that bid. So, but that is generally my process. I hope that sort of helps people out, and I hope it made sense.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that you just mentioned there, Jack, as well, which we did touch on it in the summer when we did that little series of strategy pods, but you mentioned about creating a lineup that could finish first, but it could finish last. And I think this is sometimes where people fall down in DFS is, as much as it would be nice to own, the all the popular players, shall we say, that's not necessarily going to win you a slate, because you're likely picking people there who everyone else who doesn't necessarily, highly owned players, people that don't necessarily come at this from a strategic point. They'll just go on and, like you said, Jack, they'll look at the slate and they'll be like, yeah, I like him, I like him, I like him. Guesswork, casual playing, that kind of thing. And you can get a step up on people like that by thinking outside the box a little bit. And when you're building your lineup, thinking, right, well, I could play this guy who maybe 40% of the people that are playing are also going to pick. So I'll keep up with that part of the field. Or I could maybe look at, I'm a little bit unsure of him for whatever reason. I could maybe look at this guy who is going to be less than 10% owned, but if he goes off, he's going to give me a massive advantage over the other guy. And that's a little bit of what we're saying is, when you're building your lineups, don't be scared to be a little bit contrarian with your picks, because ultimately that is the kind of thing that is going to set you apart from the rest. I know you've had some success in recent weeks on FanTeam specifically, Jack, where you have been doubling up on tight end. That in itself is a win or bust strategy, because we know how volatile the tight end position can be. However, we also know that a tight end on certain teams is a number one receiver. The Ravens are a prime example of that. Mark Andrews, I know Marquise Brown has obviously had a fantastic season up to this point, but number one receiver there really is Mark Andrews. Kyle Pitts in Atlanta. There'll be certain weeks where you can really take advantage of some of the pricing with tight ends, because they do tend to be a lot cheaper than the higher end receivers that you own as well. And that twin tight end set alone, because a lot of people won't go down that route. If you've got a week where you're picking a fourth receiver or a third running back and they don't perform, but that tight end does, you've got a massive head start then on the field.
What I have noticed on FanTeam lately as well, a lot of people, I mean, I'm guilty of this. For the first few weeks of the season, I was doing it. I was playing 3 running backs. And I don't actually think that's a good strategy, because you need them running backs to do a lot. And if one of them misses, which is we have to take into account the position that they play as well. The running back is a horrible position. They get beat up badly through the season. Injuries can occur like at snap. That's probably the number one position in all of football that gets injured the most.
Yeah.
So it's such a volatile position like that. I've noticed that, and it was something I was very guilty of earlier on in the season, and it's something I've moved away from entirely now. I will either play the 4 wide receivers, or, like you've mentioned, Nick, the 2 tight ends, which in the last 3 weeks has just been smashing for me.
Yeah, I think as well, the thing with running backs, Jack, is that 70% of the league now really operates some kind of committee running back approach. Even, and I'm using the Rams as an example here, because I know the Rams, I watch them week in, week out, and even in recent weeks, I know Darrell Henderson has picked up the odd knock here and there, and he had the week where I think he was COVID exempt. But you've seen this most recent week where we've played Seattle, Sony Michel, Darrell Henderson starts the game, is practically in for every snap. Sony Michel suddenly starts taking snaps, suddenly starts running well. And there's a lot of teams that do have that approach where there is a bit of a share of the carries, even if there's a running back that's coming in taking 5 to 10 touches away from a starting running back. It's hurting the production, especially if it's not necessarily a starting running back that is contributing a lot out of the backfield. There's few and far between Derrick Henry type running backs across the league now.
You see it, like you say, you see it everywhere. Dallas, for example, Tony Pollard, you see him taking stuff away from Zeke. Tony Pollard, to me, still looks like a better running back at the minute where they are. You see it with the Giants, Saquon Barkley. They draft the guy in the first round, number 2 overall pick, and you've got someone like Devontae Booker coming in, taking 10 snaps in the game, stealing targets, things like that. And to be honest, he looks a better runner at times.
Yeah, Definitely. So these are the kind of things that I think people have got to think about when they're also putting the lineups together. Is, are you building a lineup that's going to be middle of the pack, or are you going to build a lineup that is either it could go off, it might not do. That is always the risk.
Yep.
But if it does go off, you're going to be up there in the cash spaces because the guys that you own, or there will be certain guys that you own that will be low owned, which is what's going to set you apart from the rest of the field. No, but fantastic that about the process, Jack, and I'm sure very helpful for some of the viewers and listeners that we have. You mentioned about the Thursday game tonight and talking about that, so I think it would be rude if we didn't at least look at the slate there. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to look at that Thursday night game, which of course is the 49ers and the Titans. One thing I did just want to bring to people's attention is with FanTeam, you obviously have the normal the normal sort of £1.68 entry, or €2, I think it is, for people playing across Europe. And then you've got the higher entry fee for these Thursday night games, and they tend to be for Monday night games as well, and the late games on the Sunday. But if you're feeling lucky, and I know you've had some successes on these recently as well, Jack, you've got the satellites to the Redzone contest, so you're entering something at £1.26. There'll be that one, for a prime example, the 10 seats guaranteed. So if you're coming in the top 10 there, you've got yourself a free entry into I say free entry. You've paid £1.26 to basically enter the Redzone contest on Sunday, and that will be the mid-level entry, which is usually around £10, and gives you the chance then to win the higher pot rather than the lower pot. And the advantage of playing these satellites is that there tends to be less people that enter them, so you're up against a smaller field than you would be in the normal standard Thursday night showdown slate. We've also got the satellites to the World Cup of Fantasy Football, which has been postponed slightly, but is still going ahead, I believe, in February. So there's two different ones. We've got the step 1 to the €55, which would then give you access to the step 2. And if you win that step 2, obviously you're getting a ticket for the World Cup of Fantasy Football. You've played some of these recently, Jack, haven't you? And it's almost certain you've won some tickets on them because you've been winning at everything else.
Yeah, so I've got a ticket into the World Cup of Fantasy Football, which is great. I managed to use my strongest lineup in that competition last week, and I've now got another step 2 ticket for this week, and I've already entered into the step 2 contest for this week. But I mean, it's not my final team, as I'm sure we're going to touch on the COVID situation shortly, but I will certainly be looking at that about 5:30 on Boxing Day evening, just to make sure I'm still happy with it.
Yeah. So with tonight's game, we've got the 49ers and the Titans. First of all, Jack, which way do you see this game going?
I think the Titans win.
Yeah, I think I'm. That's the way I'm leaning at the moment.
I like the Titans. They're at home. I tend to sort of favour the home team anyway, and their defense has been playing a little bit better in the last few weeks against Jimmy G. It's whether you trust Jimmy G. I know you can get at the Titans defense with opposing wide receivers. I mean, they're 27th against opposing wide receivers on the season, the Titans, so they're not particularly great, but they do defend the run well. They've only given up the 6th most fantasy points against the run on the season, and that is the DNA of the 49ers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from what you've said there, then, I mean, the 49ers running back situation puts me off most weeks, if I'm being honest anyway, because they are one of the teams that we mentioned that do operate a committee approach. And even when you think, right, well, Mitchell's out, next man up, it's still one of those backfields where it almost goes off the hot hand. Jeff Wilson could start the game, but Hasty could break off a 40-yard run, and before you know it, Hasty's had most of the snaps that night, and you've piled all your hope into Jeff Wilson. So it's one of them backfields I hate going near anyway. But is there any interest from you for the backfield in Tennessee since Derrick Henry's gone down?
I mean, yeah, there is. Again, I've got all of these guys within my player pool tonight. Dante Foreman, Jeff Wilson for the 49ers, Jermichael Hasty. I've got Hillard for the Titans. I've got Nichols as well. They're all within my player pool. You know, like you say, Nick, it's not neither running back room is particularly great. Out of everyone, I think Devontae Foreman's probably my favourite play out of all the running backs, just because from what I've seen of the Titans in recent weeks as well, you have to bear in mind Devontae Foreman, drafted by the Texans in 2017, tore his ACL, I believe, in his rookie campaign in the preseason game. He had one really good snap and then he tore it on the next snap in preseason. But he was very highly regarded coming out of college, Devontae Foreman.
Yeah.
And he's just never recovered from that injury. Obviously, cut from the Texans, been on a couple of other teams. But from what I've seen with the Titans and the way he runs, I'm not going to say he's Derrick Henry but he looks like Derrick Henry. But he's you know, you get what I mean. He's not Derrick Henry. No one can replace Derrick Henry. But he is running hard for that team. And out of this running back core tonight, he's probably my favourite play.
Yeah, he's coming off a big week as well. He had 108 rushing yards against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and not a shabby showing the week before that as well, with 47 rushing yards, 15 receiving yards, and a touchdown against Jacksonville. So yeah, I like that play. And 11.8 is fairly reasonable, really, for a running back if you're just including him within the pool. If you're not going to be necessarily captaining that running back, because I know that you said you're like AJ Brown and Kittle were on your radar for this slate this evening, Jack. So I think 11.8 is more than reasonable for a running back if you're looking to include someone like that in there. I think the strength of this slate does lie with, I know we've got Kittle there in the tight ends, but it certainly for me lies with that top end receiving core of Samuel, AJ Brown, Brandon Ayuk. And surely there's got to be a week where Julio Jones just shows us a little bit of a glimpse of what Julio Jones used to be. Whether that is this week or not, who knows?
I have no interest in Julio. He pulled his hamstring at the end of that game last week. He just doesn't look right. He doesn't look like the same player he once
doesn't
was.
Look like who he looks like a shadow of his former self, doesn't he?
Which is a shame because he was arguably the greatest receiver about 3 or 4 years ago in the league. Like for me personally, he was one of the best receivers in the league. So it's a shame, but yeah, I can't play him. He's not in my player pool tonight. I've left him out. I can't play him just because, he could play one snap and get injured straight away. He could pull that hamstring again. It's just too risky for me to get involved in with Julio.
Yeah, I'm inclined to say exactly the same. I would be looking at these three: Deebo Samuel, AJ Brown, Brandon Ayuk. But outside of that, again with the receivers, I think it's a little bit hit and miss. I think if you've got someone like I know that whilst AJ Brown's been on the sideline, there's been the odd game where Westbrook-Ikhine has had decent games. Joanne Jennings occasionally pops up for the 49ers, but again, you can't really trust him. And I don't think some of these guys at 9.8, 7.2, I don't think they're quite cheap enough where they really excite me. There's someone that I think you're an absolute must include.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've got a couple of them guys within my player pool: Chester Rogers, Westbrook-Ikhine, well within, and Jennings they're all in my player pool. But like you say, you need a lot of luck with some of these guys. You need them just to get like a 50-yard bomb down the field and catch it in the end zone. You need a lot of luck to go your way.
Yeah. And the thing is, you have got to include players like that, haven't you, Jack? Because you are, at the end of the day, on a limited budget, especially when you're playing showdown, because as soon as you set your captain on someone, straight away, you've eaten a chunk of your budget there, because your captain, I think, on FanTeam is 1.5, and then your vice captain, I think, is 1.25 of the value. So, again, it's 1.2 of the value, even not 1.25. So you have to include these kind of guys, but obviously don't be relying on them. I think it's good to have, you're building lineups with set players. It's good to have a bit of a mix and a bit of exposure to a few of them. So if you're differentiating between your lineups, if there's say 3 or 4 core players that you really like, those other 2 that you don't, just switch them up and multi-enter, and then hopefully there's some kind of exposure there across all your lineups.
So what I have been doing with these showdown slates as well, I've been obviously, again, like going back to my process, you get a game script into your head. You think you predict something that could happen. So if you want to get cheaper, I've been playing the defense as well. So for instance, I mean, I'm surprised at that 49ers is more expensive this week. The Tennessee Titans are playing at home. I much prefer their defense this week.
I actually really like captain defense, even if it's just one lineup. I just like doing it because, do you know what? If you hit on it, defense is, again, we know they're not notoriously high scoring, unless you're the New England Patriots. But then you've got there's the odd weeks where if you catch them on the right week, it's such a good differential plays. Mark would be loving me for saying this, but 23 points against the Jags, the 16 against the Rams, who were flying high at that point. The Chiefs 17, 13 against the Jags again, 10 against the Colts. For what you're paying, if you can captain a defense because of the price there as well, by putting them as captain, it doesn't eat that much into your budget. And if you do manage to get them on the right week, it can be fortuitous. But the risk is, if the other team comes to play, then you could have a week where you're scoring 2 or 3 with your defense.
Yeah, definitely. You and Mark are just mad sometimes. So Mark and his 2 goalie stacks. That
Mark a little bit more so. Yeah, do you know what? I think that's a mixed sport thing as well. Mark seems to just love playing any sport that has a goalkeeper or a goaltender. Mark plays 2 of them.
Yeah, there you go. Can I just give your listeners one of my lineups tonight, and then
yes,
happy with that?
I'm going to build this as you telling me, Jack.
Right. So AJ Brown was the captain.
Right.
Tannehill as vice captain. You put Jimmy G in there.
Oh dear me. Yep.
Tennessee Titans defense.
Yep.
Devontae Foreman.
Yep.
Deebo Samuel. And Jawan Jennings.
And that leaves you with 1.21 in the bank, but you do not need to worry about that when you're playing Showdown, because money in the bank, you don't have to spend every penny. You don't have to spend every penny when you're playing the Redzone slate. But I think in this, because there is such a difference in price from one player to another, there will be times where you will have budget remaining. That's not a bad thing, but that is a really, really good team, Jack. I like that.
Yeah, I like it as well, but I think we're going to be sharing the winnings now with about 200 people. We'll all get our money back.
Yeah, there's gonna be so many people. Hopefully, if anyone is listening, it is tomorrow morning, and they've missed the boat on this. But no, it's a fantastic team, and again, it just shows if you can include the likes of Jennings, and you've thrown in the defense there, which is cheap, 7.3, and it's the cheaper defense of the 2 as well. Being able to stack AJ Brown, Tannehill, Foreman, and having exposure to Samuel there, who's been the X factor in that San Francisco offense this season, and captain AJ Brown as well. You're not even having to look at captaining someone who is priced cheaper to try and fit them in your lineup. You're captaining one of the guys that you'd expect would score really well in this kind of game. So that's fantastic lineup.
And still got money in the bank. But just remember, guys, on these showdown slates, you do not have to spend all your money.
Yes, absolutely. I'll be entering that myself, Jack. Thank you very much. Before we do move on to the main event, which of course will be covering the Redzone slate on Sunday, just a little bit of housekeeping as we usually do. Mark, again, I'm hoping is in Italy proudly sporting his Manscaped t-shirt, like I know he loves doing on these Thursday pods, especially because it is Thursday. But just to let you know that support for all 5 Yard Rush podcasts, including the Daily Fantasy Sports Show, is brought to you by Manscaped, the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped have recently launched their 4th generation trimmer, the Lawnmower 4.0, all across Europe. Fantastic tool. Don't neglect the area. If there is any ladies listening to the show, unfortunately, you are probably just outside of Christmas postage now. But keep an eye out. You never know. Boxing Day sales on Manscaped. I don't know if they do exist, but get on there and treat your fella to a nice bit of the Lawnmower 4.0. You cannot go wrong with this tool. So many great features to it. I'm seeing the advert more and more on TV. Jack, absolutely stunned that they've not asked me to special guest on it, to be honest. But hey ho, there you go. What can you do? There's only so much you can talk about something before you got to take the hint. What I would urge you to do, listeners, is join over 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you. We have 20% off and free worldwide shipping. When you get to the checkout at manscaped.com, just enter the code 5yard. So manscaped.com, code 5yard at the checkout, and you will get 20% off and free worldwide shipping. Unfortunately, as I said, you will have missed the Christmas postage now. But I would say this isn't just for, it's a little bit like a dog, the old Lawnmower 4.0. It is not just for Christmas, it is for life. So get yourself on there and treat yourself this winter. Awesome, Jack. I think it is time then where we talk about the Red Zone slate on Sunday, and I can feel my voice getting slightly croakier and croakier. I don't know if it sounds that way, but I am hoping that you are ready to talk about what is coming. So here we go. Sunday slate. We'll start as we usually do. We're going to build a lineup. And do you know what? I'm going to take a leaf out of your book, Jack. I'm hoping we're going to build a twin tight end lineup with this. But we will see where we go with it.
Okay.
And we'll see what is available. So we will start with the quarterbacks. I looked at this earlier and mixed bag for me this week. There's some that I really like and some that I don't like, but unfortunately the ones I really like seem to be near the top of the list. Is there anyone that's caught your eye specifically in this group of gunslingers this week?
I mean, I think Justin Herbert's going to catch the eye of people because they're going to look at the matchup, but on paper, that's not actually the easiest matchup. The Texans on the season have only given up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Now, that is probably a lot to do with the game script because once the teams get up on them, they just run the ball. So a lot of that could be down to that as well. But my favourite expensive play, I really like Tom Brady as well because I think he's going to play really angry this week, and I feel for that Carolina team. I just think they're going to come up against a buzzsaw in Tom Brady. He's not going to be a happy person after putting up 0 points the other day.
He doesn't have 2 bad weeks in a row normally, does he?
No. I know he's going to be without a few key players. Godwin, Evans is 50-50 at the minute, but he's got Gronk. That's all that matters. And he's got playoff Tonio is back in the room as well. So we'll see how they go. But my favourite expensive option is Matthew Stafford. This is my favourite game of the week. This is the game I'm stacking. It's the Rams and the Vikings. It's going to be a high scoring game, I believe. The only thing I would worry about with Stafford is, we saw this last week with the Cardinals traveling across country. When they played the Lions, they ended up putting up a horror show. They sort of got it back within the last quarter, but sometimes it's weird. It's a weird thing, Nick, isn't it? Sometimes you get these West Coast teams and they go across the East Coast and they just don't adjust, especially when they're kicking off at that 1 p.m., which this game is as well. It's the 1 p.m. time slot. But I'm looking at the matchup. It's going to be a high-scoring game from what I can see. The Vikings, their defense is just not very good, but you can get at the secondary. I like Matt Stafford at that price at 19.8 million. He's my favourite play at the top this week.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I think outside of Tom Brady, of course, I think when you look at the games this week, that game is, if you're going to do a big game stack, that game looks to me like the one to target because it's two high scoring teams. I'm really worried about the Rams though this week. It's a short turnaround for them, having
Yeah,
played on Tuesday with the rescheduled game, and though they came through that game fairly unscathed, Seahawks are a physical team, so I just hope it hasn't taken it out of them. And like you said, traveling from one side of the country to another, um, though it's though it doesn't seem like that much, even just traveling from here to, just as an example, New York, and that's a little bit of an extreme because New
yeah,
York is about sort of a 6-7 hour flight, depending on where you're flying from in the UK. But when you land, that can take it out of you. Sometimes
yeah.
just being on the road and that short week as well. I know I completely get that. On the flip side,
It's a 4 hour flight from coast to coast in America.
yeah,
So
and
it's
being sat on that plane and the potentially different planes to the kind that me and you fly on, Jack.
yeah, of
But
course, yeah,
at the same time, it's a late game on the Tuesday and then flying over and playing on the Sunday. Short recovery time. Vikings needing wins. It's a tough game, and I do worry in that one. And though Matt Stafford is still putting up good scores, his turnovers have concerned me a little bit in recent weeks as well. On the other side of the field, Kirk Cousins at 17.1.
yeah. I'm interested in that as well. I mean, I know Kirk Cousins hasn't turned the ball over. That this is a concern of mine. I know he hasn't turned the ball over a lot this season. I think it's 4 times the whole year. He's been very good, very safe with the ball in his hands, but he's going up against a very, very good defense in the Rams. Like you've got Aaron Donald, Von Miller, you've got Jalen Ramsey back from COVID. This is a legit defense, and I do worry because I'm presuming Jalen Ramsey will shadow Jefferson the whole game. Um, Thielen is still 50-50. We don't know. I do think he will play because there was a chance that he could have played the other day, actually. So I do think that he will play. But we've seen it before with Cousins. He gets locked into a guy, and maybe Jefferson's not the guy you want to be locked into this week when he's being shadowed by Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah, yeah. I do like it, Jack, and I think there's a good stack there that you can put
Yeah,
together, and I think there is the case then where you can build a really strong lineup with players from both sides. If you were playing a Matt Stafford, for example, one of the things I noticed, and I'm jumping the gun here, but I felt like the Rams' defense was priced really nicely this week at 7.4. Would that be something that you would look to stack? Or would you be completely exploiting the skill positions if you're picking Matt Stafford or Kirk Cousins here?
Mark's going to shout at you now for going to defense way too early there. So, um, no, it's not something I'm going to be doing. There is I don't know if I've mentioned this to you before. There's a tactic I like to do. I like to stack my defense with one of my running backs. Gives you a bit of good coloration within that game. Then I like to do that. So, no, it's not something I want to do. We'll get onto defenses, I suppose, in a minute. There's a much cheaper defense that I like this week.
Yeah.
That's going to be it's in a great spot.
Yeah.
So I will certainly be stacking Stafford with the skill guys. Cup's on this slate. I'm playing Cooper Cup. I don't care how much he is. The guy is just putting up. I mean, he's seen double-digit targets in every game except one this season, and in that one game, he still had 9 targets. So
Yeah,
it's,
his scoring is frightening this year, and like you
yeah,
said, I think you could probably price him at this stage at 30, and I'd still have interest in him.
yeah,
Because look at some of those scores in recent weeks. We'll come to Cooper Cup, but I am more than happy to slide Matt Stafford in there purely because I am a Ram.
yeah.
But also because I'm with you, Jack. I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. Rams on the road. Rams still need to win the games. They've got a tough schedule to end the year, and they still need to win those games because the Niners are winning games and are just on the shoulder. The neck and neck with the Cards now in the NFC West race. The Cards seemingly doing what the Cards do every year and faltering when it comes to the last sort of 25 meters of the 100-meter race. But yeah, I do like it, and the stack that you can put together through the receivers is always good when you're talking the Rams. Stafford and Cup is money. Do you know what? I'm just going to go to the receivers and I'm just going to put Cup
Yeah,
straight
just
in
just
right
put
now,
Cup in.
just so we know what we're playing with more than anything.
Honestly, just to your listeners, if Cooper Cup's on the slate, just play him. Literally, I don't care what he could be owned at 99%. I don't care. Just play him.
I'm hoping that the price being 24.1 puts people off a little bit
Yeah.
this week. It might put a few off. I suspect he'll still be fairly highly owned, especially if people are going to start Stafford as well.
Can I just briefly mention, just going back to the quarterbacks as well? There's another game that I do like as well, and it's Baltimore and the Bengals.
Yes, yeah, I love that as well. I actually really liked Joe Burrow when I was looking at this earlier on. Joe Burrow, when he played the Ravens a little earlier in the season, he had a really good game. 3 passing touchdowns, 416 yards. So I really like that. And again, I think there's a great stack you can put together there for a reasonable price in that game. But yeah, we're going with Stafford. We're going with Cup. We're moving on to the running backs, Jack. This page this week is so concerning for me. Yellow marks everywhere on almost any running back that I would have been considering. Green marks next to the ones that, as a rule of thumb, I tend not to look at. But yeah, from this slate of running back, this feels like one of the weaker weeks of running back. We've looked at some weeks where I've looked at running back and I've thought, I'd love to play 3, I'd love to play 4. And even though we've mentioned earlier on this show that playing 3 is not always a great strategy in this, with these running backs this week, I dare say I'll definitely only be playing 2. But we've got to pick the 2 that we're going to be playing, Jack. So who have you got your eye on in these running backs?
I'll briefly mention. I mean, I think a lot of people are going to look at Patterson against the Lions. I would be a little bit wary because Patterson's banged up at the minute, and they've been mixing up Mike Davis back in with that system, which is really annoying for fantasy purposes. Like, it really is annoying.
And season long as well. I'm sure a lot of people on Patterson season long.
So, because I mean, he's got that big green next to him, so everyone's going to be like, "Oh, nice matchup." He's got the green next to him. So I'm moving away from that. And again, this is another play that I'm going to be moving away from because I think a lot of people are going to go to it and just get involved in it. It's Ronald Jones. And Ronald Jones, I'm getting away from it for a reason. I try not to include, this is something I should have mentioned within my process, actually. I try not to include recency bias within my process. But I've always had a thing with Ronald Jones that I never really liked the player coming out of college because he doesn't pass block, run block or pass block or anything like that. And a lot of people go, "Oh, it doesn't matter for fantasy." Well, it does because ultimately it's what gets you on the field of play. You have to be able to do everything as a running back. So it does matter for fantasy. And we've seen with Bruce Arians before with Ronald Jones. Ronald Jones has fumble issues. No doubt about it. He has a lot of fumbling issues. And Bruce Arians is not afraid to take him out of the game. So I am very wary of Ronald Jones, and I think a lot of people are going to see it. Leonard Fournette out, a lot of people are going to go to it, and I understand the play because there's a lot of other pieces out for the Tampa Bay Bucks. The Carolina defense is not what it was at the start of the season anymore. I believe you can get at it in a lot of ways, but the players that are around him are the guys that I'm more interested in at lower ownership. So I'm interested in David Montgomery. You can run on Seattle. Yeah. I'm interested in Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We've just seen what the Fonte Foreman done. And I again, a lot of people, I don't particularly like Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a running back, but we've just seen what Dante Foreman done. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a much better running back at this stage than the Fonte Foreman. I'm interested in Mel Sanders. Mel Sanders doesn't have a rushing touchdown all season, which is concerning. But in the last 3 weeks, he's just seeing yardage. And he's putting up the stats for yardage. For some reason, the Eagles get a bit excited. They see Jordan Howard as their goal line back. Don't really understand it, but they get a bit excited about it. So fair play to them. So
massive yardage in the last 2 weeks. That had completely flown under my radar. That
exactly. And the Giants have given up the 27th most fantasy points to opposing running backs in the last 2 weeks. So Miles Sanders is in. I like Miles Sanders a lot. He's one of my favourite plays this week. That's what we were saying earlier about ownership. Try and get away from it because a lot of people are going to see Ronald Jones there. I get it. I get it for what Leonard Fournette's done, but Ronald Jones is not Leonard Fournette. I would rather play them running backs around him, like I say, and David Montgomery, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Miles Sanders all interest me this week.
Yep. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is one I'd looked at as well, Mark. I don't know what the status is at Mark. How used to saying Mark am I here? I do apologise, Jack.
That's right.
Out of sight, clearly not out of mind there. One of the things, Jack, that I had looked at, and I don't know what the latest is on this, but Tyree and Travis Kelsey, are they both doubts going into the weekend?
Yeah, they're both. Well, again, this is the only thing with the COVID protocol, isn't it? You don't know if they've got COVID or if they've been near someone that's got COVID. So you get put on it for a number of reasons. I don't know. They're both questionable going into it. If they're going to play, then that would knock Clyde Edwards-Helaire down massively for me.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I had seen, and that was one of the reasons I really like Clyde Edwards-Helaire this week was if those guys aren't on, then surely the volume is certainly going to be there for him. Potentially some of the receivers there for Kansas as well, some of the cheaper receivers. But one of the other ones that I'd spotted on the list, I want to know what you think on this one because he had a fairly quiet week last week, but earlier on in the season, he was getting really, really involved in this New York Jets offense. But what are you thinking on Carter this week against the Jags?
Michael Carter absolutely burned me last week. And again, I'm trying not to include recency bias within my process anymore. But there's two teams that I'm staying away from for fantasy purposes all the way to the end of the season now. One's the New York Jets. And one's the New York Giants. I have no interest in any. I have no interest in any player that plays for a New York team.
Yeah. Are we classing Buffalo in there as well as Buffalo, New York?
Well, no, it's not, is it? But I suppose it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I only say because I know earlier in the season there was a point in time where Michael Carter was, I think, the most targeted running back, and he was having some really good games on the ground as well. You can see there that he had a week of 14, 16, 32, another 18 slotted in there, and that's against Buffalo. But obviously he's had that injury. He came back last week. I'm with you. It is murky water over there in New York. But
I think you have to remember as well with Michael Carter that when he was putting up them big numbers earlier on in the season, you had the whole wide receiver core there. So I'm pretty sure that teams are not too bothered about Braxton Berrios getting 10, 20 yards on them. I'm pretty sure they're not bothered about that anymore. So they're just going to look to shut down the run, get after Zach Wilson. And totally off subject, but Zach Wilson just looks like Sam Darnold to me. It's like they drafted Sam Darnold again. Don't get it. But,
he looks like a slightly worse Sam Darnold, if anything, as well.
Yeah. Hopefully I'm proven wrong. But
yeah, we'll see on that. Nearer I know we've mentioned Patterson there, Jack, but nearer the top end of the running backs. I know you've moved away from Najee Harris in a lot of your season longs. But if some of these running backs were confirmed to be starting, is there any interest at all in the likes of Swift against the Falcons, Jacobs against the Broncos, even Mixon against the Ravens? We mentioned that we like that matchup.
Swift won't play again this season, I don't think. I know he's questionable every week to come back. I don't think. I just think the Lions. I mean, what have they got to play for now? They'd just be wise to shut him down. He's their prize asset. What have they got to play for? Najee, again, another player that absolutely, really, guys, you do need to stay away from this recency bias stuff. Like Najee absolutely burned me on DraftKings last week. Killed me. 4 points on here. Like had a horrible game. 18 rushing yards. Just a horrible game. Outside of Patterson, I mean, J-Rob, he went back to his normal usage, didn't he, last week?
He did.
Without Urban Meyer there, which was nice to see. But I believe Carlos Hyde's back this week as well. So it will be interesting to see how the new coaching staff deploys it.
He's certainly got the matchup there against the Jets, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he's very interesting for the matchup, but he's also got a questionable tag next to him again, like most of these running backs. Josh Jacobs, I like the game script that there could be within that game, but it's a tough matchup against the Broncos running defense. I mean,
Yeah.
when we get onto defenses, the Raiders are my favourite defense this week against Drew Lock. Like, start them, forget about it. Drew Lock turns the ball over, something mental. So the game script is potentially there for Josh Jacobs, but I am a little bit wary because that is a tough run defense he's going up against.
Yeah. I think one of the
go on. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say one of the names you mentioned, Jack, was David Montgomery, and I'm gonna slot him in because I saw that the Seahawks can be run on this past week, and he's had some decent weeks recently, and I think people will be put off by David Montgomery, because the Chicago Bears are a little bit of a dumpster fire as it stands at the moment, and that said, obviously fired the head coach recently, but coming up against Seattle on the road as well, I don't know if maybe that will put a few people off, though their season looks dead and buried. But you were going to say something then, so.
We'll go back to David Montgomery quickly. Do you know he saw 95% of the running back snaps last week?
That is a massive share.
Yeah, I mean,
which is a rarity, even on some of the teams like even on say like Tennessee, where Derrick Henry is in the. Derrick Henry even is tough to push 95% on a weekly basis when Derrick Henry's fit, so that is huge.
Yeah, it's massive. I mean, he's a solid play. He's gonna be lower owned, like you say. People are going to look at Seattle and go, "Ooh, Seattle give up the 31st most fantasy points on the season to running backs." This is a lovely matchup. I mean, I like Justin Fields this week. If you want to get cheap at quarterback, Justin Fields has been putting up numbers in recent weeks as well. Another cheap option you could use. But David Montgomery, I think you put him in low ownership, you're going to get on him. Like I say, I think a lot of people will look at Rojo near similar price, look at Rojo and go, "Oh yeah, we'll play Rojo."
Yeah.
And there's a game script for Rojo for a fumble, and he's out the game.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. And I think a lot of people will pivot to him, especially because of the success Fournette has had recently in Tampa Bay's offense.
I was going to say as well, if you wanted to go on to page 2, there's Justin Jackson there with Austin Eckler out on the COVID list.
Is that another one to monitor going into the weekend, or is he confirmed that he will absolutely be out this weekend?
Again, it's something to monitor. The Texans,
one of those in the up in the air kind of thing. Yeah.
But it's a good matchup, and you get a nice value there at 9.4 million. The Texans give up the 27th most fantasy points on the year to opposing running backs, so it's a good matchup.
Yeah, that's a good spot because I think at this stage in the season now, I think there's. It felt like earlier in the season there was some bargains to be had on this second page, but I feel like week on week now it's becoming fewer and far between on this second page, and less and less reliability there. A lot of the teams even were committees in operation. There's someone that has emerged as the one that's taking the most snaps in most instances. The only murky one is when both healthy. The Denver Broncos sure still concerns me, but yeah, I think Montgomery's a really good play. I'm going to give this second running back position to you, Jack, to choose, because I know that there's a few names down here like Miles Sanders, like Edwards-Helaire that you've picked. They're very similarly priced. Who are we going with?
We'll play Miles Sanders. It's a great matchup. I like that.
Love that. And are we both in agreement that 2 running backs is the way to go this week?
Yes, most definitely.
We'll move on then from that, and we won't be returning to the running back position. The wide receivers then, so we've already mentioned the Rams and the Vikings is a game that we really like. Is Justin Jefferson and Auto include them for you there as well?
It's hard, isn't it? I mean, Dalvin Cook was my auto run back, but obviously Dalvin Cook's got COVID now. So, and I've already mentioned about Jefferson probably getting the shadow treatment of Jalen Ramsey. So maybe you move down to Adam Thielen, who's I think he'll be back this week anyway. Adam Thielen, so he'll play the slot role a lot for them. Nice and cheap, nice salary saving there at 13.3 million. He would probably bring back. I don't really have any interest in Tyler Conklin just because it's a bit unpredictable at tight end for them there. KJ Osborne maybe if Phelan doesn't go, but I mean he's 8.1 million. KJ Osborne didn't have the
He's
best of
holding
games.
there, isn't he?
Yeah, didn't have the best of games last week. Only 5.10 points put up, only 21 receiving yards. But the week before he had 83 receiving yards and a touchdown against the Steelers.
He had a pretty good game. Well, I say pretty good. He had a receiving touchdown, 47 yards, 4 receptions against the Lions.
Yeah.
But no doubt will have been priced reasonably cheap again there in that one. So you're not too disappointed with 14.7 when he's priced as he is.
I do worry with Jefferson going up against Ramsey. I mean, look, Ramsey for me is the best cornerback in the league. He's one of my favourite players to watch at that position. So I really, but again, Justin Jefferson is one of my favourite wide receivers in the league. So I actually personally can't wait to watch this matchup this week because they're two of my favourite players. It's going to be interesting. Is Justin Jefferson matchup proof? I guess we're going to find out this week.
Yeah, I think I do agree that I think Ramsey will be on him a lot. However, Raheem Morris's scheme they've been using Ramsey in some really strange ways this season where they've almost had him in it's almost like a hybrid cornerback role where there'll be times where he shadows wide receiver 1. There's times where he's almost like a part of the linebacker group. It's like they're using him as like defensive player X, including him in plays where they think, they want him involved, whether it's shadowing the quarterback, whether it's shadowing a running back, whether it's shadowing the top receiver. They just want him involved wherever possible because, like you said, for me, I completely agree. Pound for pound, he is the best cornerback in the league. He's one of the most physical cornerbacks in the league, if not the most physical. And he completely shut Metcalf down this past week, which this season doesn't seem like that big of a deal because Metcalf's just not been the DK of old.
Yeah.
But
no Tyler Lockett last week either, so that is
well, that's the thing, and that makes it all that bit more impressive for me. Is that he was getting more of the targets, and he was still completely shut down by Ramsey. Ramsey just kept cradling his arms, like rocking the baby kind of thing, and that is what it felt like watching it. It was like man against little baby boy, despite the size of DK Metcalf. But I still think you can play Jefferson this week, but I think against the Rams, it's always whoever the top receiver is that he's coming up against. It's always a tough sell when you've got that prospect of facing Ramsey there. So I do like that pick of Thielen at 13.3.
And you get salary relief because we've locked in Cooper Kupp as well, so you get the salary relief.
You do. We're on 4 more players with 50 mil left. Obviously, we'll be going cheap at defense.
Yep,
Jack. But amongst the rest of the receivers, there's a couple of these games that we've mentioned. Like we said that the Chargers, likely Herbert will be highly owned, so you would expect that Keenan Allen and Mike Williams will also eat in that ownership as well there.
Yep.
The Bengals and Ravens, again, Chase and Higgins. There's been weeks where I've played both Chase and Higgins, but they're very similarly priced this week. Is there any interest for you there as well?
There's a lot of interest. The Bengals receivers interest me a hell of a lot this week, and if I'm playing one, it's probably Jamar Chase for that deep bomb threat. The Ravens have gone for it 2 weeks on the trot to go for 2 points at the end of the game to win the game because they can't go into overtime because they don't have any secondary. So I think Jamar Chase is a lock, and I think he'll catch I reckon he's going to go nuts this week. I think he will be the slate breaker this week.
It feels like someone that we pretty much have to include then. My next question to you would be, as we are stacking Stafford and Kupp already, there's a couple of the Rams receivers a little bit cheaper on this second page, Van Jefferson and Odell Beckham. Have you any interest there?
Yeah, it's Odell Beckham for me. I mean, since he's gone to the Rams, he's just seeing an uptake in targets. They're using him how he should be used as well, as that sort of gadgety guy coming out the slot as well. It's kind of how the Giants used to use him all over on the wide receiver sets, which is how he should be used. So I like it. He would be my play if we were going to play Odell, but if we were going to play another Rams wide receiver this week.
Yeah. Before I do move on to the tight ends and we come back inevitably to either wide receiver or tight end, Jack,
Yep.
is there anyone else that we haven't mentioned here that you liked?
I mean, Russell Gage, but they've priced him up this week. He's just been seeing a lot of targets for the Falcons, hasn't he? 23 points last week, 10 points the week before that, but then 22 against the Bucks the week before that. So he's been seeing a nice chunk of receiving yardage. But you do worry with the Falcons sometimes. They're just, I don't know, they're a weird team to watch.
Weird team, yeah, they are. Yeah. That is exactly the right way to describe them. Weird team.
Hunter Renfro, I believe. I think a lot of people will go there. I kind of might stay away from that because I think he might be shadowed by, is it Satan, the Broncos cornerback?
Oh, he's had a really good season as well.
Especially with Darren. If Darren Waller's out, I think Renfro might get the shadow treatment there because I think the Broncos would just say, we'll try and beat us deep with Deshaun and Zay Jones, who absolutely cost me in a DraftKings slate last week. But anyway, we won't mention that.
Zay Jones popping up with that Marvin Jones week last week. Zay Jones. He is another one who you can never play him week on week, but he will pop up once or twice a season and burn you, and that is Zay Jones.
In regards to that, that's probably it. Is there a couple of can I just give you a couple of players or games that I'm avoiding?
Absolutely.
So a game that I am definitely avoiding is New England and Buffalo.
Yes.
I don't want no part of it at all. I think it's going to be a very low scoring game. The Bills have somehow got a run game going. Devin Singletary actually looks half decent.
He did last week, and I actually thought of you when I saw him running one in. I thought there was a point actually. There was a play he didn't run it in, but he went. He sort of like went one way and then came back the other way, and I remember watching it and I was thinking, "Oh my God, this guy looks like he's running with a piano strapped to his back." He seems like he's going nowhere fast, but like you said, he did actually have a decent game last week.
Yeah, he did. He looks good. So I just think the game's going to be very weird. I still really, obviously I'm not going to play him this week, but I do still really like Gabriel Davis, who looks the part now, and they are using him in the red zone a hell of a lot. He's just catching touchdowns for fun. He had 2 touchdowns last week. Again, he was someone that I used in my build last week, Gabriel Davis. So he had the 2 touchdowns last week, which was nice. He's seen a lot more of the snaps now that Sanders is out. Another player that I'm avoiding is Chase Claypool, who seems to have got the punishment treatment of Tomlin after his little incident in overtime the other week.
Yeah,
Chase Claypool is actually someone that I was avoiding just general fantasy season-long stuff all off-season because I read a couple of articles about Chase Claypool. He's a bit of a knucklehead off the field, throws a lot of tantrums. Tomlin's not going to stand for anything like that there. And you've seen it in the last week with James Washington and Ray J. McLeod out-snapping him for targets and things. Stay clear of Chase Claypool.
Wasn't there that story in the off-season with Chase Claypool as well, where he had apparently assaulted someone in like a nightclub or somewhere like that? He does seem a bit of a head case, doesn't he? And that the other week is just, that is the act of someone who is not in the sport for... It might seem like such a small thing for someone that's casually watching the sport, but at that point in the game, what he did showed me that Chase Claypool is very much me, not team. So yeah, I've not liked him all season, to be honest. And even last season, I didn't like his volume in terms of receptions. Deontay Johnson was massively outweighing him on that side. It was just that there was weeks where he was catching 3 touchdowns, really bumping his figures up. So yeah, I've been off Clabel pretty much all season as well. But yeah, Gabriel Davis, interesting that you mentioned that one, Jack, because I know you were high on Davis going into the season with some of the fantasy, like the dynasty lineups and stuff like that you talk about. But he's been really good in recent weeks.
He's been really good in recent weeks, and it's good to see as well because they brought in Sanders. I don't really know why. Sanders is kind of at the end of his career. Was once a great receiver. He's coming towards the end of his career now, and I didn't really get the move in the off season when they done that. You've already got your two main guys. Then you've got Gabriel Davis there as well. So I didn't really get that move in the off season when they done that, but it's nice to see.
Yeah. We will come back to the we'll potentially come back to the receiver position, but I want to move on to the tight ends. We've already mentioned Gronk, who is, I think, a safe play any week when Tom Brady's throwing the ball. Is Gronk an auto include for you this week on revenge week for Tom Brady?
I mean, if we can afford it, yeah. I don't know if we can afford it. That's the problem.
I think if we are going to go cheap on defense, depending on who this final player will be, I have a feeling we can afford him.
Lock the Raiders defense, and it's really cheap against Drew Lock.
Wow, 7.1. Yeah, it is cheap.
It's too cheap, isn't it?
It gives us 12.8 to then play with. So that then it's whether we come back to the tight end position or whether we come back to the wide receivers.
It is hard at tight end this week. I had this problem earlier. It is hard. We put Kyle Pitts in for some reason. I don't. It's not a play. It's not a play that I can get behind sometimes because I just. I'm very wary of rookie tight ends, and I mentioned it on the show I done earlier. Pat Fryermuth is the rookie tight end that you all wanted Kyle Pitts to be. But Pat Fryermuth has got a concussion this week, so he might not even play. So we can't play Pat Fryermuth. I did like Noah Fant. The Raiders are really suspect to tight ends, but then I remembered it's Drew Lock, and if we're going to lock in the Raiders defense, I certainly don't want to be bringing anything back on that.
Yeah.
But he is someone that you could use if you went a different way with your build, for sure. Jared Cook is someone that you could use as well if you wanted exposure to the Chargers. The Houston Texans are 29th on the season to opposing tight ends. It's a nice matchup for him this week, but he is very touchdown or bust, Jared Cook. Like you need him to get into the end zone.
Yeah, definitely.
But maybe he does that this week with Austin Eckler out. You never know.
Yeah, his name has actually come up a couple of times in recent weeks because he has had some tight end favourable matchups, shall we say, but he is touchdown dependent, like you said, Jack.
Yeah, no, definitely. If we was to go back to wide receiver, because I to be honest, I as I said to you, I don't really want to go near that Patriots and Bills game. I don't like the look of it. I think that could be a game that's like 9-3, and I'm not even joking. It's going to be very low scoring. I don't like that game at all. So we've got 12.8 million left, have we?
We have.
I mean, if you really wanted to go nuts, we could put Odell Beckham in.
Yeah, Odell is there, Gabriel Davis is there, but I know you said you don't want to touch that game.
No.
So for me,
it's Odell.
It seems sensible going with Odell, especially because he has had some of the red zone looks in recent weeks as well.
I like it. That's a big game stack that we got there going on. I know he only got 1 point against Seattle the other day, but the Rams didn't need to put up many points against Seattle. They just run the ball on them. So
yeah, and I think just going back to the tight end briefly there, Jack, as well, because I know that Mark Andrews just had a massive weekend for you, didn't he, in some of your lineups? 28.5, 35.6 consecutive weeks, huge performances. The question then would be, we've gone Odell and we've gone Gronk there. Before we finalise this team and lock it in, do you prefer the Gronk and Odell pairing there, or would you prefer to see Mark Andrews' name at the top of that team sheet with one of these budget wide receivers? I mean, we're going as far down as Mecole Hardman then, which might seem a little bit more appealing if Hill and Kelsey are out, but then we're looking on page 3, and that is it's not pretty viewing.
I certainly have zero interest in Mecole Hardman. Do not. If you was to go on to page 3, there is a play there that I like, and it's Ty Johnson of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Is Antonio Brown even on this slate? I've not seen him.
He's
yes, he is 15. He's 15.6 million. So he's well out.
Oh yeah, but he just snuck under the radar there.
Yeah, just sandwiched in between everyone. I've mentioned KJ Osborne. Again, monitor Thielen, see if Thielen's out. You could play KJ Osborne. But Tyler Johnson of the Bucks would interest me if you was to go down there. I don't think you do. I think we stick with what we had when we. It's a shame because if you did get Mark Andrews in, we've kind of got the the mini stack there of another game, which I like to do as well. It's another process I like to use where we've got a Bengals player and a Ravens player. But unfortunately, just with this build, we can't really do it. The only way we could do it is go back to running back, where you maybe take David Montgomery out, you put Justin Jackson in, and then you could do something like that. I don't know. You could do something like that, I suppose.
Yeah.
But then you need stuff to go your way with COVID situations and things like that.
Again, and this is just a theoretical, what if this happened, if Thielen was on the sideline slotting in KJ Osborne, then gives enough to go with that.
Yeah, and I would love that. That's I like that a lot. In fact,
I was trying to do the maths in my head then as I was looking, and I thought, why am I doing this? FanTeam does the maths for me when I switch the players round. But what am I thinking of that?
Yeah, lock that in. I like it.
Yeah, do you know what? And I really like that, because as much as I like Odell and I like the looks he's been getting, for me, I think that feels like the safer pick. And KJ Osborne, he could just be that under the radar receiver this week where he gets some of the looks, because Jefferson is being shadowed if Thielen isn't quite 100% and ends up on a bit of a snap count, maybe. At 8.1, he's still reasonably cheap. But to me, Jack, that is a really strong lineup, and I do like, though I have been not so much in the red zone contest, but in season long, I've not been an advocate of twin tight end in season long, because I think it works in the red zone slates because it's a one-off just based on that weekend, those games. But it is a volatile position week to week, the tight end position. We know that. But to be able to slide in Mark Andrews and Gronk at the top of that lineup and still have Cup, Jamar Chase, Stafford, Montgomery, Sanders throughout the rest of the lineup, I am really pleased with how this has actually turned out this evening.
It's great. Even the defense is great. Like the Raiders they're an okay defense. They're going up against Drew Lock at home as well. So
that is a prime example, I think, of when we were talking earlier about a lineup that could win this. I certainly don't think you'd be coming last with this lineup, but this is the kind of lineup where obviously people could go and enter this lineup now because we have built it, unfortunately. But this is the kind of lineup where this could win you a slate, because there's so much ceiling with this lineup, position on position. And likely will be lower owned as well in there.
Well, I'm going to be locking it in.
Yeah, I might join you there. I say I might join you. I will absolutely join you on that. Absolutely no doubt there. That pretty much brings us up to close. So in summary, the lineup that myself and Jack have built this evening, I think Mark could be happy with this one as well. I hope he is. I can't wait to hear from him.
He'd have T. Higgins in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he would complain as well that we've got two tight ends in, because I know that Mark's not a big tight end fan. One thing he will be pleased about, though, is we didn't really talk about defense that much. So we have Matt Stafford in at quarterback. We have David Montgomery, Miles Sanders at running back. Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase, and KJ Osborne round out our receivers. Mark Andrews and Rob Gronkowski at tight end. So we've gone the twin tight end route. And finishing the lineup, we have the Raiders defense at home to the Denver Broncos. That is a great lineup. We've got 500k left in the bank, and I really do not care, Jack, because that is a strong lineup, and I am not bothered that we're leaving money on the table there. It gives us, I think, an opportunity to take some money off the table come the end of the slate.
Exactly.
Fantastic. That rounds us off. Best of luck, anyone that is playing week 16. We are coming up to the business end of the season now, so make sure that you put your research in, put the hours in before you put your lineups together. Make sure you do gamble responsibly. Jack, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, and I certainly hope it's not the last time we see you before the end of the season as well. There's still a lot of football to be played between now and February. But where can the listeners find you?
So you can find me on Twitter at Jack Humphrey KM, and with the cool kids on TikTok at Jack Humphrey KM as well.
And the even cooler kids with the spaces. I don't know if we'll have a spaces. I doubt we'll have a spaces this weekend because it's Christmas. But Spaces is usually live on Saturday evenings, I think, has been the popular window for Spaces. So keep an eye on Twitter going forward, because Jack has been hosting Spaces. I've been on there a few times myself. There's rumour that Marvin Jones is going to guest star 1 week on Spaces as well.
But we'll wait. Hezbollah, I thought.
Hezbollah's definitely coming on, stealing some phones and dropping some bombs on people. But no, thanks as always, guys, for listening. Remember, catches for sure, touchdowns for dough. I hope everyone has a fantastic Christmas. Stay safe over the holiday period. Look after your loved ones, look after yourselves, and we will hopefully see you again next week. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.